Go. I forgot to physically plug the microphone into the interface. That's it's been a long time since I did that. It's a good start. Hi Pedro, how you doing? How goes the day? I kind of just woke up. I woke up at like 6 a.m. and then I went back to sleep, and then I woke up at 10:30 and now it's 11 for me. So sleepy. Yesterday I saw my friend's sister in the musical MJ, which is at the Pantages Theater in Los Angeles right now. Waking up is good, sleep is good too. Agreed, both good things. MJ is a musical about Michael Jackson's life up to 1992. And you know, there's a lot about that man's life that makes me real uncomfortable, but I won't lie, the musical was very entertaining, very well executed. I don't know how I feel about romanticizing a man who has done questionable things at best, but it was a fun night. And damn, that man made some good music. Anyway, we are wordling. Oh, I don't have music playing. There we go. His life makes me feel odd. Yeah. Yeah. Let's turn down the music a little bit. Hi, Oscar. Haven't caught a stream in a while. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, I am doing well, actually. Hope you are too. We're gonna be reading more of my dad's book. We're getting toward the very end. You can see the little break in the pages. What should my starting word be? Berry? Very well. Very well, voice in my head. We'll go with berry. Voice in my head? That wasn't very helpful. Nah, I tease. Starting all gray is actually a very helpful clue. Well, it would be more helpful if I hadn't used double letters, but I did. This is too loud in my ear. I don't know what it is in your ear, but it's too loud in mine. I was gonna do globe, but two of those letters are definitely not in it. Plots. All right. Slows. Floss. Gloss. There it is. I like when the Wordle guesses sort of form like a little animal shape. That's the head, that's the beak or something, that's the tail. I don't know, it's like a duck dog. It's like a fusion of a duck and a dog. Anyway. It's time to read the book. Yeah, you know words. All right. Secular Zen in context. The world is rightly becoming sensitive to cultural misappropriation. When we tell a friend in distress to just be zen about it, or if we scream karma when something bad happens to someone we think deserves it, we are misappropriating. That is, we are minimizing and misusing something from a culture we don't understand. This is inherently disrespectful and contributes significantly to loss of meaning. If anything in this book is a misrepresentation of Zen in particular, or Buddhism more generally, the error is mine in reaching past my modest understanding of these large subjects, or borrowing too heavily to make my own points. I hope I am using Buddhist teachings respectfully to help put certain ideas across, but I speak only for myself, unless and until you find something in here that speaks for you too. These two questions must be asked. How can it be that taking the spiritual premises out of a religion doesn't empty it? Is separating worldly lessons from a religion's otherworldly premises disrespectful to a vibrantly alive tradition and the people who identify with it today? A number of Buddhist teachings are presented in this book, and the reader will develop more than a passing understanding of Buddhism. However, this book is not intended to be a comprehensive curriculum in Buddhism. The book in your hands intentionally skips several topics, ignores supernatural claims except when a specific point is to be made about them, and rejects the denigration and regulation of physical pleasure that traditional Buddhism shares with nearly every other religion. Here is the bias you will find in this book. I didn't start out with Buddhism and provide guidance on how to have a Buddhist life. I set out to document aspects of Buddhism that can help anyone, Buddhist or otherwise, to live a life that is less painful and more deeply satisfying. Leading Buddhists endorse rather than object to this approach. Quote, "Don't try to use what you learn from Buddhism to be a Buddhist. Use it to be a better whatever you already are." His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Quote, "There is a misconception that Buddhism is a religion and that you worship Buddha. Buddhism is a practice, like yoga. I met a Catholic priest who lives in a Buddhist monastery in France. He told me that Buddhism made him a better Christian. I love that." Thich Nhat Hanh. Quote, "The purpose of studying Buddhism is not to study Buddhism, but to study ourselves." Shunryu Suzuki. Quote, "The ultimate authority must always rest with the individual's own reason and critical analysis." His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. The world would be a much nicer place if all religious leaders were similarly non-dogmatic. As Stephen Batchelor points out, the quest to reinterpret Buddhist teachings in new cultural contexts is exactly how every now accepted form of Buddhism came to be. Quote, "Such a quest is nothing new. Every Buddhist tradition that has come down to us from Asia is founded on a different set of foundational Buddhist texts over time and has constructed its own canon. Moreover, each tradition speaks to us in a distinctive voice inflected by the cultural and religious concerns of Indians, Chinese, Tibetans, Japanese, and so on. In some cases, this has led Buddhists to compose apocryphal sutras that are attributed to the Buddha in order to grant them authority. Elsewhere, the writings of founding figures in those traditions, such as the Buddhaghosa, Huineng, and Tsongkhapa, have themselves acquired canonical status. This creative vitality that has characterized all historical Buddhist schools will probably continue as long as the Dharma remains a living tradition." Stephen Batchelor. That religion changes is rarely acknowledged by religionists, but historians and religious scholars tell us it has happened and continues to happen in every religion. We do not hold that Mahayana, Zen, or Tibetan Buddhism are invalid because they are not Theravada, the oldest form of Buddhism still in existence. Secular Buddhism and Zenish secularism are among literally hundreds of legitimate reinterpretations of Buddhism that attempt to reshape and repackage ever-evolving Buddhist thought in good faith, so an additional set of people operating in a different cultural context can also obtain its benefits. Frankly, this is what religions should do as their intentional mission, and be proud of it instead of denying and denigrating the attempt to be of more value to more people. Buddhism's ancient history ranges from the deep, tranquil quiet of meditation in search of ultimate enlightenment to one of the most influential martial arts ever developed, and from ancient mysteries to modern empiricism. As such, Buddhist teachings have been and continue to be put to a very large variety of purposes, both religious and secular. This book presents a number of Buddhist ideas that find application in such diverse activities as acting morally, responding to behavior that is immoral, attaining personal goals, managing stress and anxiety, dealing with physical and emotional pain, achieving more equanimity in daily life, and recovering when that peacefulness is lost to life's minor annoyances, major disorientations, and most terrible losses, injuries, and debilitations. Be Zen about it uninstructively advises one to be calm in a situation that is distressing, as if that is just a trivial decision. It conveys none of Zen's depth or practices. If one is going to be that superficial, I'd like them to stick with chill out, dude. If one wants to actually be helpful, then not being superficial would be a good starting point. As glibly dispensed in the United States, the word karma is misused to mean short-term retributions for transgressions between individuals. By extension, karmic payback is construed as a reason to gloat. That's a typo. However, in the religions that bring us the concept of karma, including Buddhism, it is defined in terms of one's relationship with morality itself rather than specific other people. Karma is expected to play out across very long time frames, commonly multiple lifetimes, and it is esteemed as a sober moral force rather than a source of schadenfreude. Contrast the above degradation of meaning with respectfully and gratefully learning from a culture not one's own, valuing and bringing lessons from there into an additional context that makes them accessible and valuable to more people. That is what I hope to be doing in this book, enlarging the audience for the benefits of a Zenish approach to life, helping more people to obtain those benefits without them necessarily being or becoming Buddhists. Westerners, the majority of this book's readers, have an existing association with the word Zen, that the word Zen means a secularly accessible extraction from Buddhism. I make use of that in this book, but note that the majority of Buddhist references in this book are generally Buddhist, not restricted to the Zen school in particular. This arises from the fact that the various forms of Buddhism differ much more in customs than in content, especially at the level of the core teachings of most interest to us in the West. As the most obvious example of this, many quotes from the Dalai Lama are presented throughout this book, and he is not a Zen Buddhist. The Dalai Lama, great teacher, is the head monk of Gelug Tibetan Buddhism. He is a marvelous spokesperson for Buddhism in general, and to bring any discussion of Buddhist teachings to the West while ignoring this man because he is in one school and not another would be a great mistake. Similarly, some ideas identified here as Buddhist could also be identified as Hindu, Jain, or later Sikh, as these four religions co-developed alongside each other and retain many similarities among their differences. Finally, many ideas presented here are also found in Jewish, Christian, Islamic, humanistic, and other traditions. No group has a monopoly on producing or utilizing great ideas. Academic precision regarding the history of religious and philosophical ideas is a challenging task, and happily is not required for the purposes of this book. My purpose here is to help people of any religious, non-religious, or anti-religious orientation use selected lessons from Buddhism to navigate life in a way they find more relaxed and comfortable, yet more powerful, to feel more alive, full and joyful, and yet be more detached from what from that which causes anxiety, dissatisfaction, and suffering. Like Confucius, Jesus, Muhammad, Alexander the Great, Charlemagne, Suleiman the Magnificent, George Washington, John Kennedy, or any historically significant figure, when we are told we have an accurate picture of Buddha before us, or even an allegedly direct quote, we cannot be sure that this is so. All historical figures are distorted and sometimes largely reinvented in the retelling. Even the oldest extant Buddhist texts were not written in Buddha's lifetime, as is also the case for Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. Additionally, we know from our own experience that even with today's recording devices, widespread literacy, and the internet, legends and outright falsehoods surround historically significant people, events, and purported quotes, even at the same time that the people are alive. The Buddha found in the oldest extant texts. Oh wait, it's extant, isn't it? I for years I thought it was extant, but I think it's extant. The Buddha found in the oldest extant texts mostly provides rather dry, austere assertions aimed at monks. These have little of the philosophical or psychological insight or even style for which Buddha is most admired today. They are primarily concerned with monastic life, not the life that most people live. By the time parables from these texts reach us, they have been rewritten by others and augmented with stories and quotes from anonymous authors but attributed to Buddha to partake in his authority. I have pointed all of this out in favor of transparency over romanticism, but let's note this too. Unlike most religions, rather than insisting on scripture as literal, complete, and inerrant fact, Buddhism values its stories for what they illuminate about human life today, not as factual accounts of what happened yesterday. People who believe that any complete, inerrant, original religious text exists, and that they have a copy of it, are very dangerous. They compel themselves to willfully reject increased knowledge in actual history, actual problems in and differences among translations, improved understandings in physical and psychosocial sciences. That is to say, they oblige themselves to reject all facts, and even common sense and human decency, in favor of misinterpreted fables. Hello, Revenant. Sorry I'm late, no worries. I was busy writing a rebuttal to someone who had made a science video on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but had missed a key important point in their analysis. Someone was wrong on the internet. On the note of historical figures, it feels like unless we have primary sources, such as video interviews or journals, there will always be some veil distorting the truth, in whatever way that may be. I think that's true. What comes to mind for me is actually, I think his name's Adam Douglas, the guy who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. To this day, people make up reasons that he made it so that 42 is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. There is no reason. He has stated that explicitly. He said once, I thought of a number, 42 came to mind, and I thought, it'll do. And yet, still, people will be like, so Douglas Adams is actually like a big computer science guy. And in ASCII, if you look at what character is associated with the number 42, it's the asterisk. And in a lot of computer codes, the asterisk is a wild card, meaning it can just sort of mean everything or all. And so what Douglas Adams is saying is that the answer to life, the universe, and everything is whatever you make of it. And that sounds like it makes sense, which is why it's so dangerous. ASCII wasn't even invented when he wrote that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true. I think The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is from what, the 70s, 60s? 42 is also just funny. It is. 42 is funny. And that's all it was. It was just a number he picked. That's all. It's all it ever was. And so it's the fan fiction we write that sounds believable that is the most dangerous. It has, when we write fan fiction, we have to know that it's fan fiction. We have to. It's our intellectual responsibility. Don't get me wrong, you can have pet theories, you can have hunches, you can have hypotheses. That's how we make intellectual progress as a people. But until you have reason to believe something is true, you mustn't think it's true. Sometimes people just do stuff for the funny. Yes, absolutely, and that's fine. I'm all for satire. I'm all for being playful. That's all well and good. And I understand that sometimes when you are being fun and satirical, people will take you literally, and there's nothing we can do about that. I'm not willing to give up satire because people can't figure out what satire is. One day there might be a Jonathan Baruch fanfic retelling his rise to power. Oh god, I hope not. I was mistaken, Doctor Who had its first run in the 60s, but Hitchhikers was first a radio show in 78 to 80. Oh, that is much later than I thought. Huh. Anyway, where were we? Clair obscur, na na na. Treating fables as facts and employing them to harm human beings is the opposite of the moral high ground religions claim as their own. Additionally, they must be willfully blind to the gaps between their professed beliefs and their actual practices, and abandon integrity to ignore the significant parts of their own scripture that they rationalize away for their own convenience. Meow! Thank you for the 5-stream streak. Because religions are... I can't tell if you're meowing because of your 5-stream streak or if you're meowing because you're saying my dad is being catty in the text. Either one is valid. But also, I have to admit to you all, I have been increasingly anti-religious in recent years. When I was younger, I was relatively anti-religious. And then in my college years, I came to peace with it, and I was like, you know, it doesn't affect me. I don't know why I'm being so uptight about this. Like, everybody can have their own... I hadn't noticed. I've been thinking, like, you know, if people's beliefs make their lives more bearable, then that's fine. It has nothing to do with me. But then in like the last maybe 2 years, we should create religion around your amazing eyebrow mobility. I was once in an acting class where somebody was given the feedback from the teacher, like, what are your eyebrows doing? They're not going for an Oscar. Not to me, but I thought it was funny. Anyway, in recent years, I've become more anti-religious again because seeing what's going on in the world today, I think that one of the most destructive societal norms in our world is that by making religion socially acceptable, if not the default state, we are saying very openly, very pervasively, very consistently that if the most important things in human existence are scary or uncomfortable for you, you can make up something that helps you. And I think that that is extremely dangerous. And I feel that because we are in a period of such rampant political anti-intellectualism and history revisionism and just making shit up, I feel like in order to set a fair precedent for saying, like, no, you actually can't, you can't just make things up if the alternative is painful for you. You cannot. That is unacceptable. I think that if we then allow for religious belief, we are muddying the issue. And I know that that's a very extreme take. You don't have to agree with me. You really don't. But that is how I've been feeling. Because at core, there is no reason to believe in any one religion. Otherwise, there would only be one religion, or there would only be one main religion, and many sects and cults and whatever. And so, I think by saying that religion is a normal, healthy part of life, we're saying that making shit up when it's really important not to make shit up is a normal and important part of life. If that makes sense. I can go into more detail if people want me to, but I doubt that. I trained my eyebrows based on Anne Hathaway and the Princess Diaries. Considering in Texas we may or may not have to put up the 10 Commandments, sometimes I do worry about this. The illumination candles are lit. What are the scents of the incense? Vanilla, lavender, citrus, ginger? What are you talking about? Oh, the Temple of Baruch. Okay. You know how we should take our wins when we can? Well, I think the new Pope just gave us one by essentially speaking against the current administrator. I agree. I don't think that that means religion is okay. You're making sense, and I do love hearing your thoughts, as evident in our previous conversations. Yeah. What was the point I was getting at with all of this? More than anything, I think that our salvation lies in a renaissance of critical thinking. And I don't mean to imply that a renaissance in critical thinking necessitates the end of all religion. That's obviously not true. There have been some excellent philosophers and critical thinkers throughout history who were very religious. But I do think that, well, I'm troubled, because I think that the only way out of this is a return to critical thinking. And the generation that's in school right now is not being taught critical thinking. I don't know that in our lifetimes we will see times as good as those that raised us. And that is frightening to me. I hope that the generation that's currently in school is so dissatisfied with the education they've received that they seek to better it after the fact. But that is deeply optimistic. It is a big ask. It will take something extreme. And lacking something extreme, I think it's just going to be really important to take care of as many people as we can. Current state of education is certainly something. It really is. Okay, here's my most problematic opinion, and I will just touch on this lightly before going on. I think that in a world where people are so easily misled and so avidly discouraged from thinking on their own, I think we have to question whether democracy is the right model. And I know that's heretical, and I'll be the first to admit I don't know what a good replacement would be. I think that the more power we give to the individual, the more likely we are to end up with design by committee. But I also think that the more centralized the power is, the easier it is to take over the world. So I don't really know what I want. I don't really know what's good for the world. I'm just saying, I think we should keep our options open. Pedro caught me. I want oligarchy, you guys. I do. I want it so bad. Rich people historically make wonderful decisions, and intelligent ones. I think the most crucial step for critical thinking is the thinking part, and we're distracted or discouraged from thinking by both societal factors as well as social and technological. So going off grid might be best. Clip it! Yeah. Obviously, clearly my message here is death to democracy. That's obviously what I'm saying. Clip it. Don't. Anyway. That's enough of Jonathan opining. Where was I? And again, no hard feelings if you disagree with anything I've said. The reason I bring this up is to provoke thought, not to dictate the truth. I mean, that would be really ironic if I was like, we should all think more, but only if you agree with me. It's not what I'm saying. I truly believe that if everybody in the world were to commit to thinking really seriously about really uncomfortable topics, I truly believe that overall, on average, things would get better without any further instruction or programming or what's the word? Indoctrination. But I also think that in the absence of people thinking really hard on a wide scale, indoctrination might not be such a bad tool. I mean, it works for the Republicans, right? Anyway. Because, wait, did we? Yeah, okay. Because religions are generally in the business of proclaiming the one right truth, they really like to have an ancient one-and-done book for all time. It's frankly a naive and indefensible proposition that no professional scholar supports. Even though Buddhism has a better philosophy and track record than other religions in this regard, it is unsurprising that continuing diversification meets with objections. We should act kindly towards, but be unstopped by, those who resist Buddhism's continued evolution and branching. Quote, many principles and practices have become increasingly problematic due to erroneous interpretations, being inappropriate with the times, and a growing diversity in the backgrounds of Buddhists. Courage is needed in our thinking and interpretation, rather than dogmatically holding to overly literal and customary beliefs. Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. In short, when this book or any source presents something about Buddha or Buddhism, or seems to quote Buddha, we should understand this is simply less cumbersome than saying something like, over 2.5 millennia, the evolving culture of the Buddhist tradition has come to enshrine the following idea, sometimes even putting words into Buddha's mouth. And by the way, this might not be unique to Buddhism. To ensure the point is fully made, consider the two highly visible groups today that most noxiously claim perfect adherence to an inerrant text: fundamentalist Christians and fundamentalist Muslims. Perhaps the gentlest criticism we can level against fundamentalist Christians is that ignoring the biblical injunctions they don't like, while taking every opportunity to impose on others the most ignorant readings of the bits they do like, lacks integrity. At the time of this writing, fundamentalist Christians are on the verge of taking over a major world power, the United States, with all the ripple effects that holds. Instead of this, they should, of course, be living out the positive values their scripture can impart. Missing this obvious point reflects the extent to which they are engaged in the basest tribalism rather than the loftiest religious principles. Fundamentalist Muslims, as exemplified by ISIS, show a uniquely high degree of integrity that, with respect to their scripture as they understand it, but at even more catastrophic cost. I will interject here and say that I think it is... Wait, when did I pause the music? I will interject here and say I don't think it's correct to say that ISIS is fundamentalist. To me, fundamentalist means like taking the scripture as literally as possible in a relatively mainstream way, and it is difficult for me to believe. Now, granted, I am relatively uneducated when it comes to Islam, but I find it difficult to believe that ISIS is being true to their scripture in any meaningful way. Their integrity, behavior consistent with stated values, comes at the price of feeling compelled to murder almost every person on the planet and to turn those women who remain alive into men's property with sharply curtailed personhood. This strikes most of us as quite a bad idea, not only for their perceived enemies and surviving women, but even for these men themselves as tragically undeveloped human beings. It might be correct to say that ISIS perceives itself to be fundamentalist. That's true. They absolutely do, without question. Yeah. I guess it is always subjective, isn't it? It's always subjective. In contrast, moderation and humility open the door to personal and collective growth, compassion and cooperation, and the betterment of all, which, by the way, is a core tenet of Buddhism. Like other religions, Buddhism makes metaphysical assertions, defines the purpose of human life, and provides abundant guidance on how to live life so as to fulfill that purpose. Unlike other religions, Buddhism is often considered non-theistic, which is a bit tricky to understand since Buddhist stories reference divine beings. In Buddhism's close relative, Hinduism, gods are essential and active players who create and control, similar to the Abrahamic God, but in much greater number. Footnote. Some ancient Hindu texts abstractly put the number of gods at 330 million. At least 33 of them have played a prominent role in the beliefs of Hindus for millennia. Many Hindus today reckon them as multiple aspects of a single god, not unlike the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit of some Christian sects. In contrast, Buddhism's incidental role for divine beings is remarkable. But in Buddhism, divine beings are, like people, on their spiritual journeys toward enlightenment, just further along than you and I. They may have supernatural powers and reside in another overlapping realm, but they are not the creators or special controllers of the universe. Considering how much Buddha brought into his cosmology from Hinduism, this central difference is astonishing. Although Buddha gives an essential role to the supernatural concepts of karma and reincarnation, he developed an understanding of life and how to live it that relies on entirely natural ideas, such as being kind and clear thinking, avoiding extremisms, and achieving life's greatest calling and complete fulfillment by relying on yourself without recourse to godly interventions, miraculous events, or even divine guidance or inspiration. Thus, Buddhism lends itself especially well to secularization. There is less to reinterpret, work around, justify, be embarrassed about, or discard in order to extract the philosophical, ethical, and practical from the metaphysical. It is immediately available to all, without avowing or disavowing any supernatural propositions. One can believe in reincarnation and karma playing out over multiple lifetimes, but no Buddhist value or teaching is lessened if one doesn't. One can understand Buddhist metaphysical assertions in secular terms: historical, sociological, philosophical, psychological, metaphorical, phenomenological, without engaging in either great effort or logical inconsistency. Buddhist teachings are self-supporting, without recourse to supernatural mandates, as for example in Abrahamic traditions, or godly whims and conflicts, as for example in Greek, Roman, and Viking traditions, or even the metaphysics asserted by Buddhism itself. This is not just my opinion, and it is not some uninformed or fringe or disrespectful opinion. Note well the quotes pertaining to this in various places throughout the book, as well as these from the Dalai Lama. Quote, "My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness." His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Quote, "I believe that the only true religion consists of having a good heart." His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Quote, "Love and compassion are the true religions to me. But to develop this, we do not need to believe in any religion." His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Quote, "Whether you believe in God or not does not matter so much. Whether you believe in Buddha or not does not matter so much. As a Buddhist, whether you believe in reincarnation or not does not matter so much. You must lead a good life. And a good life does not mean just good food, good clothes, good shelter. These are not sufficient. A good motivation is what is needed. Compassion without dogmatism, without complicated philosophy, just understanding that others are human brothers and sisters and respecting their rights and human dignity." His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama renders religious belief secondary to such self-supporting values as compassion and kindness, regardless of whatever metaphysics you do or do not embrace. How much better off would the world be if this were the shared position of all Jewish, Christian, and Islamic religious leaders? How much more valuable would religion be if this was its entire doctrine? How much less prominently would fear, distrust, hate, oppression, torture, and war feature in human history? I love this track so much. Zen versus other forms of Buddhism. Westerners, the majority of this book's readers, have an existing, if vague, association between the word Zen and Buddhist philosophy. I make use of that in this book, but note these 2 points somewhat at odds with each other. Zen is a type of Buddhism, not a synonym for the whole of Buddhism. Within Zen alone, there are several sects. Footnote: there is no agreement on a particular hierarchy among terms such as division, school, denomination, stream, branch, sect, or other words reflecting the subdivisions of religions. Buddhist sects obviously have some material distinctions, but they vary more by customs and rituals than by doctrine. Consequently, much that is Zen is characteristic of Buddhism in general, and much that is Buddhist in general is also Zen. Like the public this book is meant to reach, this book is not careful about differentiating between Zen and other schools of Buddhism, except when a distinguishing characteristic is the point being made. At the top level, there are 3 major divisions in Buddhism: Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Some authors place Vajrayana within Mahayana rather than seeing it as a 3rd major division. To greatly simplify, Theravada adheres closely to Buddha's oldest still surviving teachings as preserved in the Pali Canon. It considers later texts non-authoritative. The Pali Canon is focused on monastic life, not the life that most people live, and it is very prescriptive. Theravada emphasizes personal liberation, enlightenment, through the practice of meditation, ethical conduct, and the cultivation of wisdom. Mahayana texts add the Lotus Sutra, the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, and other texts to the Pali Canon, expanding the scope of teaching substantially beyond monastic life and becoming more philosophical. Mahayana emphasizes the ideal of the bodhisattva, an enlightened individual who voluntarily postpones their own holy shit, I'm gonna start over. Mahayana emphasizes the ideal of the bodhisattva, an enlightened individual who voluntarily postpones their own liberation in order to help others. Vajrayana is characterized by the extensive use of rituals, visualizations, mantra recitations, and symbolic imagery to attain liberation swiftly. Vajrayana incorporates elements of Mahayana, deity yoga, mandala practices, and esoteric teachings. More crudely, Theravada tends to conservatism and Pali Canon scripturalism. Vajrayana tends to rituals and supernaturalism, and Mahayana lies between the two as the conceptually broadest and most naturalistic and philosophical school of Buddhism. Most Buddhists today belong to one of the many branches within Mahayana, and Zen is among these. An essential Mahayanan teaching is that we already have enlightenment within us and are already a Buddha, but we cannot see this and live it out because it is obscured by illusion, misplaced desires, and unwholesome practices. Quote, "To find the Dharma, turn your own light in upon yourselves and never seek elsewhere." Linji Yishuan. Because enlightenment is already within you, and not something foreign to you, you might uncover it within any lifetime, including this one. You might do so today. All forms of Buddhism include meditation as a necessary and prominent element, but the word Zen literally means meditation, reflecting Zen's distinctive emphasis on this practice. Zen Buddhism developed in Japan as a regional adaptation of Chinese Chan Buddhism, which itself is a regional adaptation of Indian Buddhism. In contrast with the English pronunciation of Zen, some Japanese speakers say Zen, which is closer to the Chinese Chan. Words that are imported into Chinese from other languages are often used in a shortened form. Chan is short for Chan Na, a Chinese cognate for the Sanskrit word dhyana. Dhyana, in turn, is a cognate for the Pali word jhana. The oldest Buddhist documents are in Pali, later ones in Sanskrit, and then in different languages as Buddhism spread to various countries. If you say each of these words with the others in mind, it's easy to hear them as the cognates they are: jhana, dhyana, channa, or chan, zen, and zen. Footnote: these are all obviously English transliterations and not exact representations of their sounds in native languages. They are, oh no, Father, oh no, oh, you can't really see that. Hello, focus please, camera. The point is, it's the rectangles. It's the rectangles for when a character is missing in a font. Father, how did you miss that? Father. In any case, they all translate to English as meditation. Zen Buddhists trust in meditation, direct transmission from a mentor, intuitive insight surpassing rational study, elegant simplicity, and helping others. This contrasts sharply with the emphasis other Buddhist schools and most of the world's religions place on scripture, ritual, prayer, and numerous precisely prescribed practices. Meditation is Zen's preeminent practice and its most trusted vehicle for producing intuitive knowing that surpasses rational study. The ideal Zen meditation is on nothing, so there is room to perceive everything exactly as it is, undistorted by the cognitive and emotional biases and prior understandings that normally reside in a non-empty mind. Assuming your father's actually pasted examples of them, that's actually the fault of the font on the printer's part. True. That is a good point. I don't know how much my dad did or didn't edit the fonts en masse after drafting. I'd be curious to see what it looks like in the Kindle version. Achieving complete emptiness of mind with no illusions, no distortions, and no desire for anything to be other than how it actually is nirvana. The resulting perfectly clear perception of the entire universe is enlightenment. Once enlightenment is achieved in a sustainable way, once everything is known and accepted just as it is, there is no illusion, nothing left to learn or desire, and therefore no more suffering. Nirvana Initiative, fuck off. Consequently, there is no need for any further reincarnations. None of us will know this until we're dead, but I have a feeling that if death is not absolute nothingness, my next best guess is that death is nirvana. Just complete acceptance and comfort. So, I mean, that's something to look for. Hey, look, no, I'm convinced that no matter what, death is the end of suffering. So at least there's that. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of dying before I'm ready. Those are two very different things. Death is easy. What were you doing for billions of years before you were born? Nothing worth talking about? It wasn't bad though, right? It's what I figure the worst possible outcome is. I mean, some fonts support all of Unicode, but honestly, those are few. And if the book is printed with strictly one font per type-specific area, then the printing font or footnotes is the problem. Yeah, and that probably is just smaller font face from the main text. I don't know. Yeah, I think so. I've meddled with latex, can you tell? I have too. I used latex for a calculus class once. One can hope. I like to think it must be a comfort after. Yeah. I like to think that too. But again, like, I feel like the worst case scenario is it's neither a comfort nor a discomfort. It's just peace. It's just nothing. I'm okay with that. I really am. I would prefer a happy afterlife. But so far as my own thinking and investigation has led me to believe that's not on the menu. I use latex for my resume. That's actually a great idea. Where was I? In a secular rendering, one does not expect to achieve complete emptiness of mind, be free of all illusion, distortion, and desire. One does not expect to perceive everything in the universe, let alone all of it at once and with perfect clarity and satisfaction. We consider each of those things to be ideal states, good for setting direction, but not actually achievable. They are good ideals because even modest and actually achievable movement in their direction is highly beneficial. They are bad yardsticks because, like any ideal, they are abstract concepts, not actualities. I feel like this book is best read over a long period of time like this because this has definitely been said almost word for word in an earlier chapter. One can expect to experience a less cultured, calmer, more perceptive and creative mind that is more productive of insights. Even in the absence of insights, a mind that gets 20 to 40 minutes of extremely restful consciousness, meditation, per day, is a happier, healthier, more productive mind. Would you like my template? I can clean it up with lorem ipsum text. Thank you for the offer. I really do appreciate that. I do have a job now, though, but I won't say no. A nice latex template sounds nice. Although I don't have a latex compiler. I assume that's a pretty easy fix. The empty mind idea has led to the popular mistaken belief that one must have an empty, silent, calm mind in order to begin meditation. That convinces many people that they cannot meditate, but this is entirely incorrect. In actuality, a less cluttered and quieter mind is a gradually increasing product of regular meditation practice, not a prerequisite for beginning it. A noisy mind is a reason to meditate, not a preclusion. I have much more to say about meditation's benefits and how to achieve a meditative state and regular practice in my upcoming book, Even You Can Meditate, which is still being drafted. In addition to regular meditation, Zen practitioners rely on frequent contact with their teacher, with a minimum of self or teacher-directed conscious thought or discourse. What is the point of having frequent contact with a teacher who doesn't say much? A combination of modeling, the psychological contagion of being with another person in a given state of mind, and the idea that what the teacher's explicit discourse lacks in quantity, it more than makes up for in timing and precision. I'm reminded of the joke about the plumber who charges $200 for fixing a problem by merely tapping a pipe. The owner complains and asks for an itemized bill. The plumber itemizes. For tapping the pipe, $1. For knowing where and how to tap the pipe, $199. Due to its preference for the intuitive over rational thinking and discourse, Zen is sometimes said to be anti-intellectual or an anti-philosophy, but that is not correct. Zen places exceptional emphasis on subjective experience, but is not free of doctrine, values, literature, traditions, culture, or instruction, and it presents an exceptionally cogent and actionable philosophy. I just, thinking about the plumber thing, I remember there was one time I was doing music for somebody's like radio play, and I felt like I didn't do much of anything. And I submitted the music to them and they're like, oh my God, this is so good. This is exactly what we wanted. Thank you so much. And I'm like, it wasn't hard. But then I had to remind myself, like, just because it wasn't hard doesn't mean it didn't take experience and knowledge. It just means that this particular project needed something minimalistic and unobtrusive. And that is what they were thanking me for, whether they knew it or not. It wasn't about how difficult it was to sequence the actual music. For my later latex projects, I switched devices so often that I began to rely on the online overleaf.net service instead, intended for students and similar, but I think it's free for anyone on a personal scale. Nice. Google Docs for latex sounds good. Thank you. Rational study and discourse are necessary and valuable. Zen is concerned that they are often mistaken for signs of enlightenment when they are actually just humble teaching tools that precede enlightenment. Your effectiveness in helping others will say more about your enlightenment than your discourse ever will. Back to Zen. This is a bit like the menu meal distinction. A good menu guides you, but in the end you eat the meal, not the menu. The fact that the meal lies outside of the menu does not mean that the menu is useless. Zen's de-emphasis on scripture and ritual is simply reminding us of the menu-meal distinction, so we don't become overly enamored with the menu and miss the meal. In Buddhism, this is captured directly in the finger-moon distinction. I know the difference between my finger and the moon, I think. We see it here in connection with the raft parable. Quote, "My teaching is not a dogma or a doctrine, but no doubt some people will take it as such. I must state clearly that my teaching is a method to experience reality, and not reality itself, just as a finger pointing at the moon is not the moon itself. An intelligent person makes use of the finger to see the moon. A person who only looks at the finger and mistakes it for the moon will never see the real moon. My teaching is a means of practice, not something to hold onto or worship. My teaching is like a raft used to cross a river. Only a fool would carry the raft around after he had already reached the other shore." Buddha. A tasty menu. Inked cellulose spice. Mwah. Oh no, the page. Scripture, or more generally, teaching, matters. But it is just a learning aid, not the subject being studied. Going beyond the linguistic and conceptual limitations of any teaching to a fuller understanding of the true object of study requires insights, intuitive leaps, and investigation. Where most religions deny this and make a fetish of the teachings themselves, Zen emphasizes the active role of the learner and the fact that teaching devices are just that. Intellect and intuition, objective and subjective, rationality and emotion, the well-articulated and the inexpressible. Well combined, these are far more powerful and far more reflective of our lived experience than any of them alone. Our task is to pursue and integrate these things wisely. But what if I'm lazy and don't want to make another raft for the next river I cross? I think in this metaphor, there is no other river. Also, if there is another river, we have to start asking ourselves, how far is the river? At what point does the distance to the next river become so great that taking the raft with you is a greater expenditure of energy and resources than fabricating a new raft once you reach the next river? And that becomes a math problem. And nobody has time for that. Quote, having an experience is non-discursive. Talking about it is discursive. They complement each other. Philosophy is discursive, but the thing that philosophy discusses is non-discursive. Chris Reed. I think that could do with a definition of discursive. I'm assuming it means capable of being discoursed. Oh. Covering a wide field of subjects, rambling. Proceeding to a conclusion through reason rather than intuition. Passing from one thing to another, ranging over a wide field, roving, digressive, desultory. I was wrong. Math? Ew. What does this look like? Latex class? That was an excellent reply to an obvious heckle. Glad you enjoyed. But yes, it was an obvious heckle. Don't worry. I was gonna say a word, or words even, about... Yeah, it's like music theory. Music is non-discursive, but music theory is discursive. I think it's exactly the same principle. It took me a while to realize that music theory is actually not... Some aspects of music theory were deliberately designed, but the primary function of any music theory system is to notate and describe and communicate things that we all intuitively know upon birth. And I don't think people talk about that enough. Because there is an elitism problem in especially Western musicianship, I understand where the misconception comes from of like, man, they just overcomplicate music theory so that they can sound smart. It's actually not true. Music theory is complicated because brains are complicated, and music only exists in brains and because of brains. So it's just there. And just like physics has no obligation to make sense to us, music theory has no obligation to make sense to us. It just is. That's how it is, and we either understand it or we don't, and that's fine. We've done a remarkably good job of finding ways to communicate music theory, and what we have today is not perfect, and it is not easy, but it is effective. Maybe not from birth? I don't know. A Checkle heckle. I don't know. I mean, neither of us know. None of us know. Nobody knows for sure where nature ends and nurture begins in anything, really. Okay, that's not true. We do know that like hair color isn't from nurture. Well, actually, even that might not be true, right? You could get sun bleached or something. Anyway, the point is, I think, based mostly on personal experience, but also looking at the world's music over time, I think that most musical psychology, most of the musical experience is genetically based. I do think that we are born with it. And it might take some time to develop, just like the brain takes time to develop, but I think most music theory is innately human, not learned. Let's all swear by 53 tet. What's 53 tet? Is that 53 tone equal temperament? That sounds terrible. I don't even know what that would mean. Is that a thing? Oh wait, yeah, isn't that a Middle Eastern standard of having 53 tones per octave? It has a Wikipedia page, wow. I've never heard 53 tone temperament. That sounds, let's say, intimidating. 53. I mean, wow. Oh. Oh, ancient China. That I didn't know. Really? Huh. I need to look more into this, clearly. Why stop at 53? Let's make even more tones. I mean, frequency is analog. We don't have to stop anywhere. Although you very quickly end up in the same thing as like, I think this should be played at 107.03752 beats per minute. It's like, okay, calm down. Nobody gives a shit. Just say 107. Nobody can tell the difference, except like the world's best drummer. Where were we? Intellect and intuition. No, we read that. Quote. No, we read that. From sculpture, music, dance, poetry, or architecture, we are moved by an experience of something that speaks a wordless language. That is the purpose of art. The emotional impact of art can work wonders on us. Zen, like life itself, is an art. Quote, I think everything in life is art. What you do, how you dress, the way you love someone, and how you talk, your smile and your personality, what you believe in, and all your dreams, the way you drink your tea, how you decorate your home or party, your grocery list, the food you make, how your writing looks, and the way you feel. Life is art. Helena Bonham Carter. That's such an actor thing to say. When you perform a good piece of music, the goal isn't to get to the end. The purpose is to feel it, and to get others to feel it at every moment and in its totality. The purpose of life is not to get to the end, but to live it well. Quote, the purpose and meaning of dancing is the dance. Alan Watts. In the teacup parable, a Zen master is visited by one who asks for instruction. The master assesses that his visitor's mind holds many preconceptions that will block his learning. He pours tea into his visitor's cup and keeps pouring until it overflows substantially. You have overfilled it, the visitor exclaims. Like this cup, the master says, your mind is full of opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? Quote, to see, we must forget the name of the thing we are looking at. Claude Monet. Ooh, that's a spicy one. To see, we must forget the name of the thing we are looking at. That's good. That's got layers, like parfait, like onion. We must minimize our natural and inescapable tendency to constrain and construe experience before we even have it. We saw in the raft parable that Buddha tells us that the time may come when we should even abandon his own teaching in order to reach our own next stage. Buddhism, and especially Zen Buddhism, tells us to see the moon, not the finger, eat the meal, not the menu, refer to the map, but navigate the real world. All language, and therefore everything we tell ourselves and each other, is a map, a representation, a re-presentation, a story about reality and not reality itself. Maps and stories are inescapably symbolic, simplifications, and imperfect. Quote, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Marcus Aurelius. Now, how the fuck did Marcus Aurelius figure that out? Way back in the olden times. Because that's true. It absolutely is true, but man, I feel like that is some advanced existential theory. I do think that one of the biggest mistakes we make as humans is when we think that we know something with absolute certainty. And it's easy to interpret what I just said as being anti-intellectual, but it's actually the opposite. It is a mistake to think that you can only act on something as if it's true if you know it's true, because you don't know it's true, and that's fine. We will never know anything 100%. We can't. We can get very high. We can get to 99.9999999. But at the end of the day, we will never know. I mean, we can't even prove that solipsism is false. And if you're not familiar, solipsism is the idea that you are the only person who exists and everything else is just a figment of your imagination. I can say in most contexts, solipsism is false, with reasonable certainty. But I can't prove it. That doesn't mean that I have to keep acting as if solipsism might be true. Everything we do is a gamble. Everything we do is a leap of faith. And our obligation to ourselves and to others is to do everything we can to make the smallest leaps of faith possible. But there will always be leaps of faith, and leaps of faith are not created equal. Not by a long shot. Sort of remind... Oh, wait. Pedro, that is nice. I wonder where your dad heard that one. He knows many things. From Claude Monet. My parents loved Claude Monet's paintings. They had several in the home that I grew up in, so it's not surprising to me that my dad knows a bit about the man. He does know many things, though, yeah. In Revenant, that sort of reminds me when I have just stared at my romantic partners of the past until I wasn't sure what I was looking at anymore, only that I held them very dear, pun intended. I like that, yeah. That quote is used in Cyberpunk 2077 as well. Oh, nice. I certainly know there is much I do not know. Yeah, me too. Similarly, there has been a physical hypothesis that there is just one electron in the entire universe just manifesting in every place it should be to be measured with incredible timing. Eventually, they found it too incredible and disproved it. But it's similar to, like, you know, the technicality, a particular, like, given context and given the scientists will say, like, we never prove anything. We just have really, really compelling explanations for all of the stuff that we colloquially say is proven. But we never prove anything because we have no objective measure of anything. Objectivity is actually an invention. It's an illusion. And it, like a menu, it's useful. It's useful to talk about the difference between objective and subjective, because there are some things that we are good enough at analyzing that we know that it will be consistent for all or almost all observers. At that point, I think it's fair to say it's objective. But we don't actually know anything. And that's okay. It just means that whenever somebody says to you, I mean, that's not proven, that doesn't mean you shouldn't believe that. It means you should consider how likely that is. Those are different things. I'm not saying believe rumors. I'm not saying disbelieve science. I'm just saying that everything has a likelihood or unlikelihood of being true. And you have to factor in that likelihood, the likelihoodedness, before you decide whether you're going to believe it or not. Like, I'm saying this right now to you live. You're hearing it a few seconds at most after I say it in real life. You can trust that pretty solidly. You've got a lot of evidence to think that that's true. But if you were to guess what color my pants are, you have a lot less evidence to believe whatever conclusion you come to with that. And if you were to guess that the poster behind me isn't actually the poster that some of you guys like wrote on and sent to me, but a very similar replica that is actually completely unrelated, you also don't know or not know that. It's just really unlikely, because why would that be true? I'm kind of belaboring the point. All I mean is that leaps of faith are everywhere, and they are not created equal. And they do not all deserve your faith. At best, a story is a finger pointing usefully at the moon. Oh, wait. I need to catch up. Their explanations are based on data. The data, when recorded properly, doesn't lie. And even if it does lie, it kind of doesn't, because that just means we're interpreting our data collection wrong. Yeah, well, there's the whole argument of, like, computers never make mistakes, right? That is true in so much as computers always do exactly what they are told. But it's untrue in that the instructions always came from a fallible human. Hi, Pazer. Play lurking, now you're late. Oh no! Science taught me ducks weigh less than witches. Yeah, they do. Glossed right through what? Oh, the Wordle. Yeah. It wasn't a 30-minute. Haha, cause the word was gloss. I don't know. It happened once, that means it can happen again. I hope not, though. That was miserable. At best, a story is a finger pointing usefully at the moon, but it is not the moon itself. At worst, a story is an unintended or malicious and undetected misdirection disguised as a truth, obscuring the actual moon. Even holy books, even if they were factual histories, cannot help being stories. Everything is just a story, because that is what language is. Even what you tell yourself is the deepest truth about yourself is just a story that is, in some important ways, mistaken and misleading. You must keep all of your stories, and all stories told to you, open to correction and improved understanding. Every story we or someone else is telling is necessarily not exactly correct, and may even be fundamentally flawed. When you are sure of something, when you are delighted, when you are suffering, when someone else asserts or implies anything at all, recall that even in the best case, words only strongly suggest one particular view of what might be so, in one particular voice, at one particular moment in time. Listen as if you, or whoever told the story, had been humble rather than suffering from an illusion of certainty. The briefest possible history of Zen Buddhism. If I am to respectfully rely on Buddhist constructs, then it is also a matter of respect to note that they heavily rely upon ideas that were well developed in India thousands of years before Siddhartha's birth. Buddhism is one of several religions that arose and flourished alongside each other and influenced each other in India. To get a sense of the prevailing cultural environment in which Buddhism formed, as a tiny sampler, note how the following quotes about yoga strongly resemble ideas highlighted in Buddhism. The word yoga here refers to Hindu spiritual beliefs and practices, not today's physical yoga postures. Quote, "When the restlessness of the mind, intellect, and self is stilled through the practice of yoga, the yogi has found the treasure above all others. There is nothing higher than this. This is the real meaning of yoga, a deliverance from contact with pain and sorrow." Bhagavad Gita. To sum up all he had to offer, Buddha said, "I teach about dukkha and the cessation of dukkha." Note the parallel. Note, too, that these religions hold in common that a contented mind, i.e. a meditative mind, is the primary tool for achieving the enlightenment that brings the end of dukkha. Quote, "Yoga is not for one who gorges themselves too much, nor for one who starves themselves. It is not for one who sleeps too much, nor for one who stays awake. By moderation, yoga destroys all pain and sorrow." Bhagavad Gita. Buddha's most essential epiphany, the one that awakened him, the first thing he said to his companions upon becoming the Buddha, one awakened or enlightened to the causes and cure of human suffering, was that we should avoid the extremes of self-indulgence and self-mortification and take the middle path. Quote, "When the senses are stilled, when the mind is at rest, when the intellect wavers not, then, say the wise, is reached the highest stage. This steady control of the senses and mind has been defined as yoga. He who attains it is free from delusion." The Kathopanishad. This could just as well be a statement about enlightenment in Buddhism. Much ancient and contemporary writing about Buddhism, including this book, places an emphasis on the role of illusion, mistaken ideas, in dukkha, the many illusions we have hidden in plain sight, and the reduction of illusions as the essential task of each person's life. Note again the primacy of a stilled mind, meditation, and equanimity. Buddhism grew from roots very deep in Indian culture. The quotes above from pre-Buddhist sources reflect the prevailing culture into which Siddhartha was born, in which he was educated, in which he lived and became the Buddha, and in which Buddhism attracted its earliest adherents. There are, of course, important differences between Buddhism and other religions of the time and region, and it is both respectful and instructive to be aware of the ground in which Buddhism first blossomed. Buddha probably lived in the 5th century BCE. Buddhism spread throughout much of Asia quite quickly and was influenced by Taoism and Confucianism along the way. In China, under the leadership of Bodhidharma, the martial art of Shaolin Kung Fu was developed as an integral feature of a spiritually focused Buddhist life in the Henan province of China. It is believed that about 100 years after Buddha, Bodhidharma in China became enlightened while meditating, marking the beginning of Zen Buddhism. Subsequently, Dosho played a leading role in establishing Zen in Japan. Scholars suspect this narrative of being a conflation of activities by more actual persons than Buddha, Bodhidharma, and Dosho, but the point here is that the culture developed this storytelling as a way to express the incredible breadth Buddhism encompasses. From quietly awakening to ultimate truths, to the tactical use of extreme but expertly controlled force to stop evil. From the elegant simplicity Zen is well known for, to comprehending the complex reality of the entire universe, all at once. After evolving in Asia for over 2,000 years, Buddhism began to penetrate the West in the 1800s, notably due to efforts by D.T. Suzuki. Suzuki was strongly influenced by German Protestant theologians Paul Carus and Friedrich Schleiermacher, and American philosopher William James. Foreshadowing secular Buddhism more than he could have known, Suzuki presented Zen as a perspective on life that has universal applicability, rather than a form of religious Buddhism. Today we can see that Zen is amenable to both religious and secular renderings, and choose what serves each of us best. That is an interesting way of wording that. Because I want to point out that a big part of this book has also been criticism of cherry picking from scripture. But it is a different thing here, right? The point of Buddhism is to take from it what is helpful to you. That's different from saying there is only one correct way to interpret it, and yet everybody decides what that is for themselves. That's a contradiction. That's a recipe for violence and disaster. That's different. In the 1950s, Alan Watts and other Beat Generation authors brought more Western attention to Eastern thought generally and to Zen in particular. A small but influential set of yoga instructors were also evangelizing in the West at the time, adding to global interest in Eastern teachings. The Beatles gave a huge boost to Eastern influences in the West during the 1960s and early 1970s. Maybe you know that such prominent contemporary authors as Jack Kornfield, Thich Nhat Hanh, and Pema Chodron continue to advance adoption of Buddhist concepts and practices in the West now, in the early 21st century. Footnote: Thich Nhat Hanh is deceased as of January 22nd, 2022. I feel indebted to this entire mixed lineage all the way back to the ancient yogis who created the world in which Siddhartha became the Buddha. Although Buddhism is ancient, it is not frozen in time. Like all established traditions, it has and must continue to find its way between preserving the best of what it already includes and evolving to meet the changing needs of the people it is meant to serve. Buddhism has a long history of being re-expressed in modified form to reach people in different cultures and historical periods. This re-expression is still going on. Secular Buddhism is just one of the latest instances of this tradition of change. Buddha. Buddha lived in what we now think of as Nepal in northern India in the 5th century BCE. However, what people mean when they refer to Buddha varies. Footnote: if you think it strange that there are multiple versions of Buddha, consider how many versions there are of the Abrahamic God. Just to get started, we have God as he appears in the Hebrew Bible, the New Testament, and the Quran. We have Christ until 325 CE, and Christ after bishops at the Council of Nicaea. I'm sorry, I feel like I should know how to pronounce that. voted that he was simultaneously God, the Son of God, and the Holy Spirit, and therefore divine and not human. We have God as he appears during the Crusades, the Inquisition, and the wars that ravaged Europe for 3 centuries. We have God as he appears in Nazi Germany, the current Syrian civil war, the current Republican Party of the United States. There is God as he variably appears in the ages old Arab-Israeli conflict, and as he appears in movies on the Hallmark Channel. The list is endless. Nicaea pronunciations I've heard vary from how you did it to basically IKEA, well, like the way I just said it. It was spelled differently here, though, wasn't it? Nicaea. Well, I don't know. I'll go with Nicaea. It's a reference to a song I've only heard once, written by somebody I don't know. Or don't remember, I mean. At a minimum, there is Buddha as he appears in the Pali Canon, the oldest extant Buddhist scripture, as he appears in the oldest post-Pali Canon documents, as he appears in later documents, and how he appears in modern thoughts about his teachings. Deciding what's in the Bible, old grumpy men. The latter places emphasis on parables that were almost certainly devised by people other than Buddha centuries after his death, and attributed to him so as to partake in his authority. Unsurprisingly, what I mean by Buddha in this book is this modern version, especially as his passage through the West has emphasized his most secular qualities. This enables access by people who identify with a religion other than Buddhism, or with no religion at all. This Buddha is portrayed as the prolific creator of insightful parables that instructively explore the human experience and engage the modern mind in both deep thinking and intuitive leaps. Our modern Buddha answers questions like a wise and loving grandfather with an endless supply of pithy stories. Though through story, he will convey a responsive lesson in ethics, philosophy, psychology, or wisdom, tuned to the level of understanding of the person who asked. This parable for every occasion Buddha is remarkably uninterested in the usual concerns of religious leaders. He actively disdains questions about ultimate realities. He is a kindly, pragmatic humanist rather than a rule-bound, doctrine-focused religionist. And then this is a picture as Buddha physically appears in Indian versus Chinese culture. And these look I know it's a little blurry, I'm sorry about that. These actually look very familiar to me. I think they might be decorations that my dad owns. This is definitely a decoration that my dad owns on the cover. All forms of Buddhism present Buddha as a man and not as a divine or semi-divine being. Prophecies attended his birth and early childhood, and his spiritual development is clearly exceptional in the extreme, yet he is human, made of the same stuff as you and I. Just as he became enlightened by relying on his own experience and reasoning, so too can any of us. Each one of us you are, inherently fit for purpose, just not fully developed yet. Buddha was interested in discovering and teaching ways of being in the mundane world that reduce suffering in the here and now. His interest in ideas again and again is in their utility in reducing suffering, not on their literal veracity. He was a teacher of wisdom and of practices that reduce needless suffering, not a teacher of alleged cosmic facts. He accepted the cosmology that was ambient in his culture before he was born, and wasn't that interested in it outside of karma and reincarnation. And hearing it worded that way makes me realize something about my own philosophy, which is that it is all about reducing suffering. I actually only care about what is actually true so far as that knowledge goes to reduce my suffering and increase likelihood of joy. Otherwise, we are not arbiters of the physical universe. We don't have any inherent sacred duty, at least in my belief. We're just here to have a good time while that's an option. So my opinion really is, if you are doing everything you can to reduce suffering in yourself without imposing suffering on others, you're already doing everything right. And that's easier said than done. It is still an extremely difficult task to reduce your own suffering and not pass it on to other people. But if you can achieve that, does it really matter what the ultimate truths are? And I know it may be difficult to reconcile what I just said with my like anti-religious stance, but I don't believe it's possible to achieve a world of minimal suffering where organized religion also exists. I don't think that can be done. I wish it could, because I understand how comforting it is to be in a religious community and to have those religious beliefs that reassure you and set you on the right path. But I don't think they do set people on the right path. Sometimes they do. More often, I would argue, they don't. So on the one hand, I think it's true that people should believe whatever they need to believe in order to achieve the highest form of happiness they can. On the other hand, I don't think everybody is necessarily equipped to know what that looks like. Does that make sense? I mean, think about people who genuinely love their children, but end up creating intense grief for themselves and for their children because they think it's sinful to be homosexual. They can have truly the best intentions and just be doing as they were instructed to and advised to by the metric they turn to in order to know what's right and wrong. But they are increasing suffering in the world for no reason. That's where it gets unforgivable for me. That's where it becomes a problem for me. And I know that that's not an uncommon belief. I feel that religion produces those results far more often than it produces happy results. And also, this is a very controversial statement, and again, I do not take any offense whatsoever if you disagree with me. Everybody is entitled to their own opinions. But I think that I understand that some people really rely on religion because without it, they can't get through the day. Just the crushing pressure of a secular world is too much to bear. And I think that really, really closely parallels how drug addicts feel about their relationship with their drug of choice. And I can't imagine telling a drug addict, no, you're right, just keep doing that, it's working for you. Anyway, Pedro, it makes sense. The intentions are usually pure. To me, there is slight comfort in that, but I have firsthand experience that the effects are great. Great as in a lot. Yeah, I do. I really truly believe at the bottom of my heart that the average human is fundamentally good and well-intended. But as we've seen, that does not guard against doing extreme harm. Well, I'm not all that devout, but the Philippines is majority Catholic and has the largest Christian nation in Southeast Asia. So I'd say religion is doing well enough for us here. At least to my knowledge, there are no mega churches here, which is nice. That is nice. I can't say that alone really sways me. I mean, like, my opinions come from, I mean, I've been thinking about God and atheism since I was 6. So, like, I hear you. I'm taking that in. I'm logging that. Thank you. But for me, it's even just stuff like when I hear people talk about, like, I was struck by divine inspiration. God gave me this idea because there's no way I could have come up with it on my own. I think that's harmful. When people say, this went really well for me and that's because God was looking out for me, I think that's harmful. It also doesn't make sense. Like, people give God credit for the most trivial things, and then it doesn't bother them that he completely neglects innocent children in third world countries on a daily basis. It's creepy to me. Not to mention, 99% of the time, when people credit something to God, the only logical way that that could be true would be if God was mind controlling at least one person. God made my omelet really good. I bet God did. That all said, Richard Dawkins himself also said that as an atheist, he's rather grateful to have grown up and developed himself in a Christian majority nation. Interesting. Can't say I feel the same. Where was I? I never know what people mean when they say God told me such and such. Like, what does God's voice sound like? I was never... That's always been mysterious to me as well. I'm like, what does that mean for you? But to be fair, that doesn't mean it's not real. Like, there's stuff that I know is real that I don't understand. Like, I know, like, very right-minded people who have described to me their encounters with ghosts. And I know they're not lying, but I also don't think they're right. And that opens so many questions for me as like, so what happened that day? And I wish I could be there and find out. I'm trying to think of other examples. But yeah, there's definitely stuff where I'm like, I don't know how that could possibly be true, but I believe that something happened to make you think it's true. I just don't know what that thing is. And while I'm curious, and I'd like to know because I think it would help me better understand the world as a whole, a lot of the time we just don't find stuff out, and we have to be okay with that because it happens a lot. A co-student of mine at astrophysics was basically a local variation of Mormon here. Yeah, I mean, science and religion, I feel like they both are and aren't at odds. When I say they are at odds, what I mean is that I think that if you really analyze it deeply enough, science really strongly suggests that no religion can be true, at least no religion that humanity has come up with. But at the same time, there are many religious scientists. So obviously other people have a different read on the situation. I don't fully understand what Mormonism even is. I'm not an expert on the subject, but the basic idea is that one day someone in the US was like nah, the Bible isn't a two-part, it's a trilogy. And I found part 3 in my backyard on golden plates, but I'm not going to show them to you, but I wrote everything down on paper, but I can't show you the gold plates because God told me not to. Which is about as compelling an origin story as for any religion. He was completely convinced that all gay people who practiced their impulses would go to hell, which he read as an actual place. I was gonna say that's precious, but it's not. The way you worded it, though, you were just mounting flaw after flaw. They're somewhat in bad faith. I still go to church with family from time to time, and people have it off, wave it off if I fall asleep. If you believe people are inherently good, then they try their best within their set belief. Yes, and I think the set belief holds them back. That's all. I'm not saying anything in bad faith. I know that there's a lot of good in people's religions. I just think that on net, there is a greater amount of good in no religion at all. And I feel pretty justified in that belief. I'm not saying religion is inherently all bad. I'm saying that it is worse than the absence of religion. Comparative, not absolute. And again, most people on the planet disagree with that take, so it's fine if you do too, but that is my belief, and although it might change in the future, it ain't gonna change today. Buddha's origin story. Even the most traditional Buddhists consider Buddha's origin story legendary and not scriptural. Here it is. Buddha was given the name Siddhartha Gautama at birth. The family name is sometimes transliterated as Gotama. His first name does not appear in the oldest texts and was likely fabricated for him by later authors, especially since Siddhartha just happens to mean one who has realized his goal. And just happens as in quotes. His birth was preceded by a prophetic dream attended by a miracle, and soon followed by additional prophecy from a holy man who traveled to see him. If you are Christian, this might sound familiar. He spent his youth and early adulthood as a prince until he left the protections and indulgences of his father's palace at age 29. When he saw that the non-princes of the world were afflicted with great suffering, he sought a solution. Abandoning his family and material comforts, he joined a group of ascetics and spent 6 years drinking little water, taking a single grain of rice for each meal, and enduring intense, frequently administered, self-inflicted pain. No, yeah, Christian church structures can be a social institution that does good for people's lives. Even my sister has had great experiences in church while being an atheist. She just started going to a church for the community aspect, and it did wonders for her. I'm not disparaging any of that. I think that all of that is genuinely good. Again, for me, it's just it's a question of proportion. So cute. When did you get the Vivi poster? Maybe like 2018, something like that. It was a while back. It was kind of an impulse buy. In this hypothetical world with no religion, I do wonder what would take its place. I think people as a whole will always need to believe in something higher. My argument is that, like, I agree with you that there is an impulse inherent in humans to believe in a higher power. I think that will always be true. I think that is genetic. I don't think there's any way to get rid of that. And to be clear, when I dream of a world without any religion in it, like, I'm not saying that we've banned all religion. That would never work. Holy shit, that would never work. But I think that it's important to the species as a whole that we really heavily emphasize critical thinking and difficult questions, especially when it's about stuff that really matters to us. And I don't think it's possible to instill that cultural message while also encouraging people to follow their faith. I think that's inherently contradictory. While sitting under a Bodhi tree, a type of fig tree, in near-dead, emaciated silence one day, he heard a passing musician speaking to a student. If you tighten the string too much, it will snap, and if you leave it too slack, it will not play. In the context of all he had already experienced, felt, and thought, this mundane statement about tuning a stringed instrument was the moment of his becoming the Buddha, the awakened one. Interestingly, it was not food or water of which he was so deprived, nor breathing, love, or tranquility. Music, non-essential to life, human-made, valued for the pleasure it brings and the emotions it stirs. Footnote. Although I like the role given to music here, I should acknowledge that other versions of the story of Buddha's exact moment of enlightenment exist, and present different stimuli as responsible for precipitating his awakening. Won't call out if you disagree but profess your atheism, but keeping harmony is generally the realm of the family. I don't think I quite understand. You'd have to live here to experience it. That's fair. That's probably true. That's probably true. I will say for my part, I have spent quite a lot of time in church, and I have tried really hard to be religious. It just never happened for me. And I wish I could say that it's just because it's not for me, but I think it's deeper than that. My religion is based around my attempted rigid belief that humans and humanity have a lot of good in them that might just need a way to be expressed. Even if I can't agree with their current ideas or behavior, it's not always easy to keep it up. What would you say is the difference between religion and philosophy for you? I'm curious. Buddha had already determined that the extreme indulgence of his youth was not a good way to live, a string too slack to be of value. In that moment, he realized that the extreme deprivation of being an ascetic, a string too strained to be of value, was also not a good way to live. He bathed in the river and ate a full bowl of rice that was offered to him. Seeing that he had bathed and eaten, his companions said he had lost his way and they could no longer learn from him. The Buddha replied, "To learn is to change. The path to enlightenment is the middle path between extremes." Lost in translation. Philosophy is a set of ideas. Religion is a collection of structured thoughts to live by, often without sufficient or satisfactory evidence. Fair enough. Even though contemporary English, 20th century to present, and Old English, 450 to 1150 Common Era, are both English, they differ so much in grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation that they are effectively foreign languages. No native speaker of either of these would be able to comprehend the other. Likewise for Middle English, 1150 to 1500 CE, and contemporary. Even early modern, 1500 to 1700 Common Era, including Shakespeare, and contemporary, make a challenging combination. Although contemporary English is obviously a living language, Old, Middle, and Early Modern, having no community of native speakers, are dead languages. Even modern, 1700 to present, may sound archaic and sometimes confusing to speakers of contemporary. I don't think I'm religious at all, but when I go to church with fam, I just empty my mind and enjoy their company. The familiarity of the ritual, both in church going and Sunday sermons, even if they are kind of dumb. Now, I actually completely agree with you, Pazer. I think that, I do think that the best thing about organized religion is the community aspect it brings to people. And I do agree that atheism lacks that. Atheism does not have a substitute for that. And that is the saddest thing about atheism, in my opinion. And I don't have a solution, honestly. I can't think of a way to... I often see people say that atheism is a religion of hate. And the big misconception there is that atheism isn't a religion. Atheism isn't a community. Atheism is the absence of those things. And I do think that although, like, yeah, some churches can be like a boiling ground or a boiling ground, a breeding ground for hatred, but more often they give people a sense of family and belonging. I get that. And I know that I'm throwing away some baby with that bathwater. Honestly, I don't have a solution to that. I hate the idea of taking that from people, but in my current estimation of the world, I do think it would be a net positive for humanity. But it would be a really big sacrifice. I don't mean to mitigate that. That is very valuable, and it's not something that comes easily to atheists. Religion, by definition, is essentially a way of life, correct? Not necessarily having a deity or worshiping. I'm generally not sure. I don't know the inherent differences between a philosophy and a religion and a cult. The lines are blurry for me. I'm sure I could figure it out if I looked it up, but I haven't done that. So you meditate. Sermons give you time to think, ponder, reflect. That's actually not meditation, though, which is useful and good for you and for everyone else in here, too. In there, too. It's a bit like the best thing about smoking is how it gives you a relatively widely acknowledged way of taking regular, frequent breaks. Fair point. When you mentioned ascetism, it reminded me of the extreme version where Buddha is basically skin over skeleton. Then my mind jumped to Kung Fu Panda, where Tigress is holding it over Poe's head for being fat while eating a little bead of grain. I do need to watch Kung Fu Panda. You're right, Pazer. We should do that for a watch party. We should. I admit it. We should. Where was I? To undertake a translation of an Old English or Middle English document into modern English, one would have to rely completely on esoteric scholarship, with no recourse to personal familiarity or native speakers, with questionable knowledge of pronunciation, puns, slang, sarcasm, conventions of formal versus informal speech, then contemporary common knowledge, top concerns, contemporary references, and so on. Some of these problems even pertain to reading documents in modern English if they are more than about 100 years old. Christianity in translation. With that in mind, consider contemporary Christian Bibles. To render a Christian Bible today, including as it does both the Old and New Testaments, requires penetrating Middle English from about 600 years ago, Ancient Latin from about 1600 years ago, and Ancient Greek from about 1900 to 2200 years ago, and Ancient Hebrew and Aramaic from about 2100 to 3200 years ago. If you assume that the earliest writings were in fact the inerrant true words of God, and assume that those words should always be taken literally, never present any ambiguity, are never inconsistent or and assume that those words should always be taken literally, never present any ambiguity, are never inconsistent or self-contradictory, and pretend that we could possibly understand the words in exactly the same way as any person in any culture in any historical period, and even if you pretend that there was only one unchallenged version of the Bible in each of the languages listed here, do you see how it would strain credibility to say that a modern translation retains the 100% inerrancy and clarity attributed to the original? At the very least, we have to note that the above premises are not only ridiculous on their face, but no professional biblical scholar would accept any one of them. As one very mild example of the scholarly view on this subject, Pierre Hadot gently noted that in the course of translating biblical texts, many slippages of meaning, if not misinterpretations, occurred, and he then went on to enumerate various flat-out errors in translation that materially affect Christian doctrine. No professional biblical scholar rejects the abundant evidence that the Bible was written over a period of centuries by multiple authors, contains substantive inconsistencies, and has been repeatedly subject to material incorrect translations. Let me catch up. Religion's good to have a space to meditate, to be
to be honest. There are set prayer times and quiet moments that have been very nice at times. I remember there were times we did a burning bush and it was just a dark room lit by candles and everyone prayed quietly. I just enjoyed that sounds really nice. I know meditation is about clearing your mind, but meditation is often used as a prerequisite step to consider something more important to think about it properly. Yeah, I think that's true. Don't forget all the apocryphal gospels archaeologists and biblical scholars have found and studied in recent history. It was interesting to hear about the Gospel of Judas and other stuff that didn't make it into canon. I didn't hear about that. This is, in effect, why people the past some 100 years have claimed that capitalism is claiming the place of religion in the newfangled secular society, calling it egotistical, etc., because secularism freed up the schedules of the religious to work more, serving only themselves. I'm not sure I fully follow all of the A to B to C there, but I think it is pretty undeniable that at least in the US, and I'm sure many other particularly Western nations, Christianity has been perverted and co-opted in many circles, many churches, to just be an enabler of the status quo. You know, the classist, racist, sexist one. I suggest Religion for Breakfast on YouTube. He talks about all religions from a historical and scholarly perspective. That's cool. The mere fact that there are about a dozen English language Christian Bibles in common use today, and that each of these was the product of a group of scholars spending years debating what to include and how to interpret it into English, definitively demolishes the idea that the Bible is unambiguous, unchanging, and inerrant. In fact, there is no such thing as the Bible, only a collection of divergent Bibles. I have chosen the following example because it is well known and dramatically shows how even part of the rock-solid core of a religion might not be as unambiguously established in its ancient texts as one supposes. The Gospels of Matthew and Luke tell similar but different stories about Mary being made pregnant by the Holy Spirit while still a virgin. 3 problems with this are: 1. As essential as this story is to establishing Jesus as the Messiah, the Gospels of Mark and John don't even mention it in passing. 2. Christians double down on the virgin birth by claiming it fulfills prophecy given in Isaiah 7:14 in the Hebrew Bible, but that is not what Isaiah 7:14 is about. 3. Virgin and other miraculous births are proof of divinity or semi-divinity for gods, demigods, and political leaders across many pre-scientific cultures prior to, during, and after the years during which the New Testament was written. Yet somehow, miraculously, Christians dismiss all of these virgin birth stories as mere myths that prove nothing except for theirs. Christian Bibles have historically translated the Hebrew word Alma in Isaiah 7:14 as virgin. Unlike the apostles Mark and John, very many Christians vehemently uphold the story of the virgin birth as a necessary fact in proving that Jesus was the fulfillment of a messianic prophecy. Let's take a look. The Hebrew word Alma means young woman, arguably young woman who has not yet given birth, but not young woman who has never had sex. The Hebrew language has an unambiguous word for virgin, betula. The word betula is used elsewhere in the Bible to refer to virgins, yet Isaiah 7:14 doesn't use betula. It uses Alma, young woman. English language Hebrew Bibles, footnote, the Hebrew Bible differs in 2 ways from the Christian Old Testament. Christian Bible compilers changed the order of various sections, and more importantly, Jewish compilers made more faithful translations of ancient Hebrew, while Christians made significant mistakes and/or took liberties to serve their doctrinal purposes. English language Hebrew Bibles correctly translate the Hebrew word Alma as young woman. That's funny since Alma is also a common Spanish name for women. As early as 1952, the Revised Standard Version of the Christian Bible does likewise. In 1989, the New Revised Standard Version retained this translation. The New American Bible Revised Edition, which a group of Catholic bishops released in March 2011 after decades of scholarly investigation and debate, uses the phrase young woman rather than the word virgin. Additional Bibles since have also begun to quietly accept this correction. But this young woman's possible virginity is not even the most important problem with this alleged messianic prophecy. The two bigger problems are that it isn't a messianic prophecy at all, and in any case cannot be connected with Jesus. Maybe this is a better phrasing. The religious were claiming capitalism was the new religion for the secular because they recognized that secular economies didn't give time for community and its inherent needs, personal as well as interpersonal social. Sounds like PragerU. Yeah, I don't think I understand that argument even still. You've never heard the name Alma? I mean, the English transliteration of the Hebrew word here is A-L-M-A-H. But the Spanish name doesn't have an H at the end. It makes me actually wonder, since so many Spanish names are from Abrahamic scripture, I wonder if that's not a coincidence. Maybe the name Alma actually comes from Hebrew. I don't know. Oh, yeah, PragerU is, yeah, exactly what Pazer said. But since they're a university, that gives them credence. They exist. They're there. Isaiah 7 presents a discussion about then contemporary military events. In it, Isaiah foretells that an anonymous young woman that he points out, virgin or otherwise, will have a child, and will name the child Emmanuel, which means God is with us. This is explicitly given as a sign to King Ahaz that he should take a certain course of action, and if he does, he will prevail. Even if this did say Betula or virgin, rather than Alma or young woman, we are stuck with the fact that King Ahaz lived over 700 years before Jesus, not 9 months. Even if we take Isaiah to mean by the time the child is weaned, eating curds and honey, not just born, that is still just a few years, not 7 centuries. Mary is reckoned to have been around 14 years old when she gave birth to Jesus, not 714. Mary cannot be the woman referenced in Isaiah. The prophecy is about a contemporary war that will end well within Ahaz's lifetime, not a 7th century storyline. If virgin were a defensible translation here, then Isaiah would have been given a prophecy about a child who came from a virgin birth and yet was not the Messiah, a child who lived a life of no special significance to anyone except King Ahaz and the child's own family. Finally, note that Jesus' name is not Emmanuel. Footnote, Jesus' given name was Yeshua. Yeshu or Yeshu with the ah at the end, probably not pronounced. Joshua in English. When translated into Greek, it was corrupted into Jesus to sound more Greek. Well, sorry, it's pronounced Isus. Sometimes mispronounced in English as Jesus, which is what I said. When translated from Greek into English, it was further corrupted into Jesus, perhaps originally pronounced Jesus, now rendered to Jesus. In any case, it's not Emmanuel. Yeshua translates to God is deliverance. Emmanuel translates to God is with us. These two ideas are not incompatible, but they're not synonyms. The only connection one can apologetically make between Isaiah 7:14 and Jesus is that perhaps some not very bright minor cleric made an exceptionally clumsy mistake and people liked it. It is much more likely that some powerful cleric or political figure purposely misappropriated Isaiah 7:14 at a time when few people could read or survive conducting an argument against a clergyman or a political leader. In summary, Isaiah 7:14 is not a messianic prophecy, does not tell of a virgin birth, and in any case cannot possibly be referring to either Mary or Jesus. Finally, there's a simpler example from the Hebrew Bible. We all know the story of David and Goliath. It illustrates the general idea of righteousness prevailing even when the odds are stacked against it. More specifically, it showcases David's exemplary character, the latter, of course, coming before we see David's terrible character with respect to Bathsheba's husband. In 2 Samuel 21:19, we read that a man named Elhanan killed Goliath, not David. Scholars looking at details of the 6 pertinent passages agree that the Elhanan version is the oldest, the original Goliath story. Apparently, killing Goliath was later attributed to David to begin the build-up to his rise to become king of Israel. When that misappropriation was made to enhance the Davidic storyline, the Elhanan version should have been removed, but as sometimes happens in editing, it was accidentally retained. What Isaiah and Samuel both illustrate is that everything we source from any religious text has been subject to intentional and accidental corruptions and misunderstandings, as well as subsequent cultural protection of the preferred version. PragerU jump scare, that channel is a plague. Yeah. I haven't seen any of it, but I'm okay with that. Most such errors are less detectable by us than the obvious compound errors regarding the alleged virgin birth of Jesus, and that one is mostly known because of how vehemently people deny that it is an error, instead of acknowledging the fallibility of the church and its doctrine and moving on. Most such errors are less detectable than the flat-out but suppressed contradiction regarding the killing of Goliath, and that one is mostly unknown because the Davidic version plays a special role in mythology, lionizing David as the future king of Israel. Excuse me. Long before the age of modern biblical scholarship, any Christian clergyman over the past 2,000 years could have easily noticed that this alleged foretelling of Jesus is wrong in all of the ways mentioned above. Yet this easy-to-spot error became one of the most important and celebrated claims in all of Christianity. Any Jewish or Christian reader of the Bible could have seen the contradiction in the Goliath stories, yet the Davidic version became perhaps the best-known story from the Hebrew Bible outside of the book of Genesis. We are always well advised to look for the message of a teaching, rather than fixating on the supposedly sacred, historically accurate, unchanging, inerrant, unambiguous, and timeless facts presented in a particular storytelling. Buddhism in translation. That was a lengthy digression to prevent the reader from imagining that Buddhist texts and traditions are lesser than Western ones because there are problems in translation and disagreements about interpretation. Unreliability and competing interpretations are endemic with respect to all sacred texts and traditions. Buddhism was an oral-only tradition for 4 centuries before it began to be committed to writing. Footnote. In the case of Buddhism, monks who lived far apart and in different cultures for very long periods of time ended up producing very similar written versions of the oldest Buddhist teachings, so we should not overly discount oral tradition. The discipline required and apparently achieved by these monks is quite unlike anything we see today among people who no longer train for decades to develop a level of accuracy and verbal recall suited to the sacred duty of the highest order. Where did that footnote come from? It was originally written on perishable materials, leaves, that have not survived. It was perhaps another 4 centuries before Buddhist writings began to be recorded on materials and stored in conditions and locations such that archaeologists have been able to find them. Translations of the earliest Buddhist writings into English from Gandhari, Pali, and Sanskrit, sometimes by way of or cross-referenced with Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Tibetan, or Vietnamese versions, are necessarily subject to the same vulnerabilities we detailed above. Gandhari, Pali, and Sanskrit have not been the native tongue or literary language of any existing community for about 1600, 300, or 400 years respectively. As liturgical-only languages, like Biblical Hebrew, they are subject to a significant degree of reduced certainty about original meaning, loss of original cultural connotation, honest mistakes in translation, and vulnerability to being interpreted in ways that appeal to those who perform or pay for the interpreting. Footnote. Hebrew became a nearly dead language as a consequence of the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BCE. Still used in preserved religious ceremonies and esoteric religious works, it was no longer in daily use as a native language. It was not revived until beginning in 1880, and it is inescapable that the revived version cannot pick up exactly where the dead version left off about 2,500 years earlier. Unreliable narration is all we have. Even in contemporary languages, we see the impact of seemingly trivial artifacts on perception. Ask native speakers of Spanish and German to describe a bridge. The word for bridge in Spanish is masculine, and the word for it in German is feminine. And behold, Spanish speakers tend to describe bridges with adjectives such as strong, while German speakers tend to use adjectives such as beautiful. In short, everything people say and think is biased in ways that function like invisible demons. I will note that that is correlation, not causation, but the point is the cultural separation causes a difference of perception. Additionally, despite the desires and incorrect claims of religious fundamentalists, religions do evolve. As followers reflected on the Buddha's teachings over thousands of years and in the context of many different cultures, it was inevitable that differences in interpretation and emphasis would arise. Fundamentalists object to this idea, but scholars consistently find that this is not only a sensible expectation, but the actual history of every religion. Editors, translators, and even those meant to be pure copyists not only tweak religious canon, but substantively add to it and subtract from it. They may be acting in good faith and making honest mistakes, or operating under pressure from their own prejudices or religious leaders, politicians, or whoever is sponsoring the work. Consequently, there are hundreds of sects within Buddhism, just as there are tens of thousands of sects within Christianity. Christian sects may hold that Jesus is only the Son of God, or simultaneously also God and also the Holy Spirit. Some hold that priests must be intermediaries between lay people and God, while others do not. There is heated disagreement on how literally to take different parts of the Bible, what parts of the Hebrew Bible are still binding and which not, whether your ultimate fate depends on your actions in this lifetime or is indifferent to your moral behavior, what documents to include in the Bible or delete from it, and on and on. By comparison, the differences among Buddhist sects are modest. But given that there are any differences at all, any story or idea presented in these pages should be assumed to be one of several variants, with no offense meant to those who are familiar with or prefer a different variant. Similarly, anything written here along the lines of Buddhism says X should be understood as a more conversational way of saying an idea often but perhaps not universally or uniquely identified with Buddhism is X. Whether we refer to the vast and varied Buddhist canon or that of any religion, an imperfectly translated and imperfectly understood ancient story is just a communication aid, not a history lesson. And we come round to the epilogue, which we will save for the next stream, unless it's like 3 pages long. Are we actually gonna finish today? Let's see, what time is it? You know what? We're gonna finish it today. We're gonna finish it today. We're gonna finish it today. Also, what? I'm gonna finish it today. I have to say, I'm gonna be taking some notes back to my dad. The last 2 chapters have all been about Buddhism and religion, and I don't think that it's like that much of the book didn't have any advice in it. It's a self-help book. That much had no advice in it. I've got words. Need to order a copy next time I'm stateside. I think we might have international shipping on it. I know Sheehan got a copy. Fun fact, my dad actually makes more money off the Kindle version than the physical copy. The material costs be big. Anyway, I'll post an Amazon link. I used to do that all the time, but Amazon strawberries. It was a book for critical thinking and media literacy as well, which is a skill that aids self-help. That is true. It certainly isn't out of place. I just don't know if it's a skillful way to end the book. No, not buy Amazon strawberries. I was hoping that it would show up in my search history. Clackety clackety clack. Ah, no. Ah, no. Starburst. Okay. I pressed pin and nothing happened. Hopefully it happened on you. On your end. On you. Alright, epilogue. Epilogue. The world is largely non-Zen, and this adds to the difficulty of taking a Zen-ish approach to life. Dukkha is guaranteed to show up. Try not to generate any extra. Pleasure will show up on its own too, but not as much as dukkha will. Generate more of it without becoming enslaved to it. Deep satisfaction comes from doing things that are both worthwhile and challenging. Make commitments with that in mind, and put in the work. Can I get it on an EPUB reader? I think so. I'm pretty sure. I'm almost certain that he published it as an EPUB document. Like, this wasn't printed out of Word or anything. We humans are unfathomably socially interdependent. Treat others as you treat yourself, and treat yourself as you treat others. Then you'll know if you are doing each of them right or not. In leadership, we should lead with compassion so that we all take better care of each other and ourselves. We are always leading, or at least influencing, by the example we set. If you are just surviving and not living joyfully, not having much in the way of both fleeting pleasures and deep satisfactions, then you are not yet taking full responsibility for your own welfare and are literally missing the opportunity of a lifetime, of your lifetime. Quote, "There is one simple thing wrong with you. You think you have plenty of time. If you don't think your life is going to last forever, what are you waiting for?" Carlos Castaneda. You are an influence on others and a model for others. You are your own primary caretaker. You are a good or poor caretaker for self and others in your every action and every omission of action. One day, you will just be a memory. Do your best to be a good one. Summary of Zen Buddhism in this book. When this book uses the word Zen, or refers more generally to Buddhism, note the following key ideas. Buddhism is still evolving. Rather than freezing Buddhism in any particular historical period, continue its tradition of reframing old teachings and incorporating new ones over time to be helpful to more people. Traditional religious Buddhism and secular Buddhism both say things that Buddha did not. Enlightenment is already within you, right now. Enlightenment is not the result of going somewhere new. Rather, it is coming home to your truest, clearest, least cluttered understanding of self. You need to uncover it, not obtain it from outside. It is not an exotic secret in the exceptional mind of a guru on a mountaintop. To see it requires courage, because it is imprisoned by everything from personal defense mechanisms to cultural institutions. It is guarded by illusion, fear, conventional thought, and social pressure. But it is already in you. Gently go in search of it, again and again, and gradually reveal more and more of it. Pressure much? Yeah, I will say this book is not written with the highly anxious or the OCD patient in mind. For real. Like, for real, though. One of the things that my dad says that I think is really potent if you're not an anxious person, and really harmful if you are an anxious person, is he'll say, we always think about the butterfly effect. We always think about how just a small change could have changed everything. But we never think about what small things are happening right now that will change everything. And on the one hand, that's like, so just like be present and make the best choices you can as you go through life. Just be present. Just attend each moment as fully as you're healthfully able. And on the other hand, it's like, everything you do will change everything for better or for worse. It's like, I can see how that might not be helpful to some people. Suddenly I thought of this thing we're always told at our school is a student may not remember what you taught, but they'll remember how you made them feel. This can apply anywhere. I strongly agree. I really, really strongly agree. I don't think that remembering something is nearly as important as experiencing it. Truly. Remembering it is nice. Experiencing it again is nice. But, I mean, the point of doing something isn't to make a memoir about it. It's to do it. Anywho, the central task is difficult to do, but simple to state. The central task in this life is to replace mistaken ideas, misplaced desires, and morally bad or pragmatically counterproductive actions with correct ideas, positive desires, and actions to match. The trick is not to figure out what mysterious thing must be done, but to do the obviously right thing with increasing consistency over time. Clearly, the point of doing something is profit. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. That's great. Will Jonathan write a memoir? Find out in 10 years. I'm actually trying to. It took me a while to convince myself that it was worth doing. I feel like, especially as a younger person who is not famous by any degree, it's inherently pretentious to think about writing a memoir. But the way I see it, there are two possibilities. One is that the mental health struggles that I've been going through are very unusual, and writing about them might help somebody who feels just like I do. And the other possibility is that's not true, and if I write the memoir, no one will care. I consider both of those completely acceptable outcomes. So I've, at the very least, started outlining, but because my energy is so limited, my ability to write about my limited energy is also limited. So I think if I finish that project, it will mostly happen in retrospect, but I'm trying to keep notes as I go. Understanding the human condition leads to compassion, and nothing matters more. Wisdom, especially regarding human nature, and compassion are held in the highest esteem and arise from mindfully connecting with self, other people, and nature. Now, don't wait for an imagined state of complete and permanent enlightenment to improve yourself or to teach and help others. Act now. Focus on illusion as the ever-present obstacle. To become uncluttered, undistracted, and fully present in the moment is artful, and is the chief means of eliminating illusion, misplaced desire, regrettable behavior, and suffering. The desired outcome matters. The teaching aids employed to get the desired outcome are just artifacts. Deep contemplation, within or outside of meditation, and the resulting insights are more important than any scripture or prescribed belief or practice. Separateness and unification are simultaneously true. Our daily lived experience is that the world is made up of uncountably many separate things. In contrast, Buddhism advises us to note the inseparability that arises from uncountably many connections and interactions. Note the paradox that separateness and unification are simultaneously true, and each is useful for different objectives. Even when only one of these things seems salient, keeping the other one in the back of your mind may lead past places where you would otherwise falter. If only I had the vigor that he seems to assume in the reader, for real. For real! For real, though. For real. How we respond to us. How we respond to what happens to us is the most important thing that happens to us. Our experience of life is largely informed by what happens to us, yet is mostly shaped by how we respond to what happens to us. We can become masterful at this. Take nirvana and enlightenment in the small installments in which they occur in real life. Although not a feature of classical Buddhism, this book promotes the idea that our daily lived experience includes recurring small bits of nirvana and enlightenment, and we shouldn't miss them by insisting that nirvana and enlightenment must be all or none and mythologically large. And that kind of goes to your point in Revenant. My dad's not saying change your life today. My dad's saying if there is a way you can make today better than it is otherwise going to be, do it. Zen is pragmatic, but not anti-intellectual. Zen is often mischaracterized as anti-intellectual or as an anti-philosophy. It is actually very philosophical, as well as intellectually and emotionally challenging. It merely points out with exceptional emphasis that saying the words but missing the deeds doesn't count. Quote, "However many holy words you read, however many you speak, what good will they do you if you do not act upon them?" Buddha. Zenish coaching objectives. One-on-one Zenish coaching is available for those who want a more personal and interactive exchange than a book can provide. What objectives might you address with Zenish coaching? There are many possibilities. Some examples follow. Knowing yourself better and using that to love and honor yourself better. Further develop and more fully live out the you that you want to be. Making decisions and converting them into actions, improving a close personal relationship, replacing self-sabotage with accomplishment of worthwhile goals, navigating relationships with people at work in a way that helps advance your career. While maintaining your integrity. Learning to break big tasks into right-sized intermediate accomplishments and make steady progress in school, sports, or any activity. Any of these might be addressed in psychotherapy, and in some cases, therapy will be required. But in many cases, good coaching will be an effective tool for making pragmatic progress, gaining insights, and developing a more comfortable and capable state of mind. This can be pursued instead of or in addition to therapy as your needs indicate. This book is designed to be of value on its own, but if you want to inquire about one-on-one live coaching via video conferencing anywhere in the world, you can do so at https://zen-ish.space/intro call, which I'll type just in case. Although no worries if nobody clicks it, I'm not expecting anybody to. https zen-ish space intro call. Wow, thank you, me, for fucking that up. Let me try again. That's better. From the website. The stylized lotus flower in the logo appears due to the lotus being one of the main symbols of Zen. It represents the serene tranquility of a still pond and the purity of a beautiful flower that rises above the mud on which its life depends. No mud, no lotus is an expression that reminds us that we don't get to enjoy life's beauty without suffering through its mud. There is no lotus without the mud. There is no life without suffering, and there is no life without beauty. The purple swoosh under the lotus suggests a heart. Heart, love, compassion, among life's most important forms of beauty and a great treasure for us to nurture and protect, especially because of all the mud it will help us slog through. The superimposed person of a figure is in the yoga pose known as Warrior 2. It is also very similar to an often depicted posture from Kung Fu, a martial art created by Zen monks in the Henan province of China around the beginning of the 6th century. It takes courage and strength to survive life's mud, and to vigorously obtain, defend, and share its treasures. Taking all parts together, the logo is intended to remind us that we should emphasize and enjoy the serene, beautiful, desirable, good aspects of life, but we must also be strong in our development of them, defense of them, finding our way back to them, and in sharing them. It does not suffice to just passively admire or wish for them, or to be selfish when we have them. We have work to do. In ancient and modern times, in physical and emotional adversity, calm attentiveness during conflict will benefit all of us in direct proportion to how good we get at it. Become a mental kung fu master and defend the best life has to offer, the best you, and the best that you can offer to others. It's very difficult, but you have much to gain from your progress. You're going to have struggles. Life ensures this. Why not get really good at handling them? Bonus content, scan the QR code below or direct your browser to https://www.facebook.com/group/784223553873718. You get that? And join a community discussion, engage in dialogue with the author, access additional content that develops over time to augment the book. Live personal one-on-one coaching consistent with this book is available via video conferencing any in the world, English only. If you are interested to schedule an introductory appointment to see if we are a fit for each other, scan the QR code below or direct your browser to https://zen-ish.space/intro call. And then there are blank pages and the ISBN number. Made in the United States, Cleveland, Ohio, 26th of December, 2024. Ooh. Thank you for joining me for Eat the Strawberries, Face Your Challenges with Zenish Calm and Confidence by Bennett Baruch, M.A. That's my dad. That was the first time I've read the book all the way through. That was a loud crack. I don't know that I did have a crack. I think I might have just, like, hit something. Or put the book down. Was that it? No, that couldn't have been it. That doesn't sound anything like a crack. Anyway. I don't know, this feels so anticlimactic. We've been reading this book for like a year. Nice. I'm really glad that we got to the end of it. It means a lot to me that it continued to be valuable to you guys. And it's also really good that I found a way that I was able to read it. Because sitting down with it wasn't working for me. I'm hoping that as my mental health improves, hopefully, over the coming weeks, it will become easier for me to start side projects and read more, maybe even watch more TV, because I mostly just play games. But we'll see. Obviously, I also really want to make more video essays. I even know exactly what I'm going to be working on next. It's just a matter of finding the energy for it. I have had a fully recorded video essay for the opening sequence of Ori and the Blind Forest since August. I really want to edit that together. I've been looking at some Clair Obscur stuff. And then I've got like the Duet Night Abyss movie project that I never quite finished because I kind of want to go through the whole thing again in immersive mode that hides the AI. I mean, not the AI, the UI. And I also want to take the feedback I got from you guys who saw it and try to go through it with a controller and smooth out the camera angles, but it's rough. The controller support for that game is some of the worst I've ever seen. Anyway, hi Aaliyah, you're just in time for goodbye. Also find it really hard to read in my spare time, so it's good having you read this through these streams. Yay, good. Hello, hello. Was play lurking? I definitely need to eat some strawberries. I don't, I'm allergic. If you're comfortable sharing, how are you feeling about the TMS? I only looked it up after you mentioned it, so I can't say I know much. Okay, so TMS is a really cool treatment. The 9 to 13% of Buddhist history was a bit of an oof. Yeah. It was a bit of a bumpy ride to the end, but really good shit in it. You would hate to miss the last stream for a time. Yeah, I don't like the idea of not streaming, but just between the new job and TMS, it's been a really sharp uptick in what I have to do each week, and I need to get used to it before I burn out. So TMS, the way this treatment works, it's called transcranial magnetic stimulation. And what they do is they put a magnetic coil up against your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex on the left side. And they force the neurons in that area to fire. They do it 5,000 times over the course of 30 minutes. And they do that 5 times a week for 7 weeks. And at the end of that, hopefully the neurons will be so used to firing that just normal everyday use of them will keep those pathways open and they won't atrophy again. It reduces depression symptoms in about 80% of patients and brings about half of patients into full remission, and some never need treatment again, and those that do usually just need like 1 a month or 1 a week. Sounds like a more humane electroshock therapy. That's essentially what it is, yeah. I will say it is a little bit painful, but that's not because of the mechanism. Yeah, I can absolutely keep you updated as I go. I'm only 4 sessions in, so yeah, it's been around since like 2008, but it's been gaining popularity. One of the reasons it's not talked about much is because it's specifically for treatment-resistant depression. It is an expensive procedure, and I'm fortunate that insurance is covering it for me. But it's never going to be like a psychiatrist's first attempt to help you with depression. But I mean, it's great. It's non-invasive. It has no side effects really other than pain during. And that's not even for everybody. The reason I have pain during is because, as you may know, all pain, just like all experience, exists in your brain, which means that if you fire certain neurons, you will feel pain. And the part of my brain that is being treated happens to overlap, as it does for a significant number of people, with the nerve associated with pain in your left orbital socket. And so it is weird because it's not chemical. I'm honestly, yeah, very, very good indeed. I'm not sure why it's reserved for difficult cases. I wonder if it really is just about the price of operation. Because, like, you have to, I mean, it's not just something you can dish out from a pharmacy. You have to go into an office and be there for like 45 minutes, 36 times in 6 weeks, 7 weeks. So I think it might just be like resources. They can't take every depression patient. But yeah, totally non-invasive, totally non-chemical. And I am getting used to the pain. It just sucks. It feels, I don't know if any of you have ever been exposed to low voltages of electricity, but it does feel like a sort of electric current going through your head. The way that they actually calibrate it is interesting, because you look more energetic than usual. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Usually the patient can start seeing differences around 5 weeks. So I can't say I'm any more functional than usual, but that's completely fine and normal. Your brain is going to be so tough after this. Tough brain. The way they calibrate it is really interesting, because although everybody's location of the lobe is pretty much the same, the magnitude of magnetism that they need to use is different depending on the person. So the way they figure out how much is needed is they actually start on the back right part of your head, the small ants of TV static. Yeah. They start over here and they actually stimulate oh, yeah, kind of like that. Touched an aquarium once and got a wee shock. Forced tickles reverberating your meat flesh without your consent. Yeah, exactly like that. So the way they calibrate it is they have you hold up your hand like this, and they pulse magnets through that part of your brain, which makes your hand go like that involuntarily, and they like tune it so that your fingers do the exact right amount of and they go from there. The idea is I'm still working up to this. Right now I'm at 90% of activation threshold. The treatment is supposed to climb up to 120% of activation threshold, meaning it's 20% more electric activity than normal activation would consist of, just to like really make sure we get there. So I'm getting close. It seems to be working so far. They were saying that sometimes it takes an hour just to get somebody's hand to go, and mine did on the first attempt. So I hope that means that this is gonna work for me. Can you hear the bird being fucking awful in the next room? I love him very much. I don't, actually. Lima, the one screaming, he actually, he taught me something about myself that I don't like, which is that I am capable of hating animals. I didn't know that. And I wish I still didn't know that, because I don't like that. But he learned me good. Ooh, he learned me good. Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate that. So I will continue doing that. I will let you know via the Discord. I'll make an announcement when I think I can resume streaming. It's just going to be a little bit because I don't want to burn out. Hating or extremely annoyed? I don't know. It's a close call. It's a really close call. I daydream about life without him. Does that qualify as hating? It's a circumstantial thing. You wouldn't hate it if it didn't actively make you feel annoyed over a prolonged amount of time. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. I could not possibly hate an animal that I saw less of. We'll have a brain cake ready. Is it cake? Ooh, what if the answer was no? That would be disgusting. Anyway, as always, it really means a lot to me that you guys spend your time with me, your Sunday mornings, Sunday evenings, Sunday afternoons. I'm gonna probably take a nap now, but I wish you all the best. I hope it's not too long till I get to stream for you again. I'll keep doing watch parties. We'll still continue through Apothecary Diaries on the Discord server. So until next time, be kind to yourselves and be kind to each other. And I will see you later. Bye-bye!